Welcome back. As we earlier said, that the government of South Sinai, it's marking its National Day, and of course it coincides, as we all know, with raising the Egyptian flag over Taba, restoring Taba after resorting to arbitration. Of course, it was a great story at that time, and we commemorate that day every year. We decided to talk more about that dear part of this homeland and a lot about this very, very precious part on the land of Egypt, Sinai as a whole. And to shed more light on this issue, we're very delighted to be having with us Mr. Karim Menabawy, the tourism expert. Good morning, Mr.
Good morning.
How are you doing, sir?
I'm very fine, thank you so much.
Today we commemorate a very important day, and we also need to shed light over that very dear part in our land, Sinai in general. So we need to know more about the long history of Sinai Peninsula, and of course the prophets who passed over this area. Sinai is not only a strategic part in Egypt, and it's not only a very precious part and a very charming spot in Egypt for tourists to come over, but also a very sacred place to the Egyptians and the whole Arab world, if you like to say.
Well, let me just bring you back when I was much younger, far younger, and this is when we just graduated, and part of our internship during the faculty was to do some training and explore Sinai. I visited Sinai when there were only 2 hotels and a half. And I mean it when I say and a half. I mean, it was really nothing. When I remember today, I mean, with such a day, when I remember 30 years or even 35 years.
That was 30 years?
That was more than 30 years. I can't tell you how many more, but let's say 30 years.
Okay.
No, but seriously, it was nearly 35 years ago, nearly. And I remember the difference now when I go and visit Sinai now as a whole, from Taba up till Sharm el-Sheikh. The difference and the infrastructure and the investment that has been put there, we really should be very, very, very proud. Let me tell you that Sinai as a whole was not just built by mushrooms. I mean, it was not just built like that. I do remember also by the time, a few years later, the Minister of Tourism, Fuad Sultan, when he came in the cabinet, he decided to stop any planned construction, to redo a master plan, a complete master plan for Sinai. And this was the reason behind the fact that Sinai was developed and was marketed much even quicker than Hurghada, that was there maybe 20 years or 15 years earlier. A very, very detailed master plan whereby lots of international experts were behind. To develop, lots of people were saying that, for instance, Sharm el-Sheikh is more developed than Taba. Don't forget that we also we don't want to see a lot of concrete. I mean, Sharm el-Sheikh was developed in a way different than Nuweiba, different than Dahab, different than Taba. When you look at it as a whole now and just drive the coast from Sharm up till our southern borders in Taba, it's a real beauty, and people get really thrilled when they just see how the thing has been developed and how you see more concrete to less and less and less until you arrive to Taba, where you see much more nature and the environment is really very pleasant. So I raise my hat for what has been done and what is even currently under development in Taba, in Sinai in general.
Right. Of course, Sinai's history not only goes back to that time, but to ancient history.
Absolutely.
Which makes it, the importance of Sinai gives it gravity and importance. How is that reflected on tourism? I mean, it goes back to the ancient history. It makes it a very charming spot, not only for a certain type of tourists, like the Russian or the Eastern European tourism, but also for Europeans in general and for Americans, for example.
It is.
So talk to us about it.
Well, it is. But in fact, I mean, maybe until 5-6 years later, Sinai was much more developed to be a beach holidays, purely a beach holidays. Very little has been developed in the area that you're addressing. This has only happened a few years ago. And to further strengthen the importance of history in Sinai in general, I'm sure you know that there is now a museum open in Sharm el-Sheikh, just to give a touch to the tourists that Sinai is not only the beaches, which is beautiful, of course. We have beautiful coast, but it's also to remind them of the history, as you correctly said, and of what Egypt also earns and owns from different culture. St. Catherine, we can't forget St. Catherine. That's a very important touch. People, no visitor arrive there except without visiting St. Catherine. Let's now talk about when you say Eastern European, that's very important, and maybe this was a little bit of, I wouldn't say a mistake, but we should have actually looked more into the Western rather than the Eastern during the past period. But of course, you know what happened with the pandemic and before the Arab Spring, which really brought the Western a little bit away from the area compared to the Eastern. Now with what's happening with Russia and Ukraine, we're losing a lot in this from this market. In fact, we nearly lost all the Ukrainian markets, obviously, and the Russian are also phasing out, not because they want to, but it's actually because of the lack of now air availability and seats and so on the planes, obviously, which is, I know that the government is also trying hard to make this still available. But yes, we are also heading now into some Western market that used to be very strong in Sinai, but they phased out again during the Arab Spring, but more and more because of the pandemic, and now we're trying to bring them back. Just to mention the British, the Germans, and the French, which were always known, the French were always known for their interest in the culture side, but not much in the beach holiday. And this is what the Ministry and the Tourist Bureau are trying to do now in order to attract more French who are starting to come in mass and in big volume into Sinai as a whole, Sham and the other part, just to balance a little bit the losses we had, which is completely out of our hand from the Ukraine and Russian. Not to mention also, we have to mention also the importance of the Italian market, which hasn't been tackled again after the pandemic much. Now the Italians started to move. They started to move originally to the culture side. We're trying to bring them to the Red Sea as well. Italian were the biggest market to Sinai by the time, long time ago. It's phased out a little bit because of many incidents. Now the government is trying, the Ministry of Tourism is trying to bring them back into Sharm el-Sheikh. It came some time that if you wanted to learn Italian, you rather go to Sharm el-Sheikh rather than going to an Italian institute. Everything was Italian in Sharm el-Sheikh by a certain time. They went away. Now there is a lot of effort trying to bring back the Italian, to promote the Red Sea, the Sinai for the French, but also to bring back the British and the German. And I think with those moves, we would be able to replace the losses we had from the Eastern Europe. Even if we can't reach the same number that we were getting from Eastern Europe, I'm sure we'll get the same yield, because we know that Eastern Europe budget are not as big as the Western budget. So even if we can't reach this number, but still we'll reach a number that will bring us to the same revenue, if not even more.
To my knowledge, also Germans were very much interested in parts like Hurghada or something like that.
Yes.
So why do we think of attracting, of us going, I mean, our way from where we are standing to attract tourists where we have all the assets? We have the most beautiful beaches there. We have some things, we are privileged with some assets that nowhere else in the world are privileged. We don't have to spend all that effort to attract. We only have to work on ourselves and promote for what we have, since we are distinguished with our assets, and people will come.
Well, that's true.
I mean, you can never compare where we see observing Sinai or the beaches in Sinai or something, or the surroundings in Sinai. If you compare it to Cancun in Mexico or anywhere in Spain, it could be compared to on a scale of 3 to 100. I mean,
That's
we win with, no deny.
I fully agree, but we can't calculate it this way. It doesn't operate this way. When you give a very good example now, Cancun and Acapulco and all this in Mexico. But don't forget that the main market for those spots, for instance, are the American market, which is very close to Mexico. So now there is a lot of factors. We have to understand that
Maldives is not. Is it too close to those areas?
No, but Maldives is not a mass destination. Maldives is not a mass destination. Maldives is a high-end resort. It's a very high-end resort. I mean, you go to Maldives for
Africa?
For honeymoon. South Africa is not mass as well. South Africa, it's
very popular.
But it's very popular, but it's not mass. I mean, South Africa, they didn't even reach 3 million, not even 4 million tourists when they were on their top. So, I mean, it's completely different. I mean, we have two different branches here. We have the resorts and the beach holidays, and we have the culture. The beach holidays is the one that will attract much more the mass, because this is where you have the number of hotels and the hotel rooms that you can accommodate the mass. But in the culture, you can't. I mean, between Luxor and Aswan, you have 4, 5, 6 hotels in each city. Maybe you have a lot of night cruises, but still each cruise is like anything between 40 to 60 cabins. So it's not really the mass. What supports Mexico is Canada, is America, and also the number of flights that both countries did avail between the two cities, between the US in general, the North America in general, and Acapulco and Cancun. This is one of the major issues we have here in Egypt, is to make the seats available. Egypt doesn't have charter companies. We depend 100%, I would say 90%, on foreign charter companies to avail their flight to come to Egypt. So this is a very important factor. We have also an issue that is currently under discussion, and I know that the government and the Ministry of Tourism is working very hard on it, is the upgrading the level of staff you need. I mean, there have been a lot of plans, a lot of programs that were made in order to upgrade and to educate and train the staff. But don't forget, Egypt went through a very, very difficult period from 2011. There is a lot of staff and employees that either left the whole sector, the whole business, because they were young enough in order to move to banking, to move to any other corporate business. And there are others who were a little bit older. They moved from Egypt somewhere else in order to continue their field, which was not available in Egypt for like 7, 8 years. Then we had a year and a half where things had started to build up a little bit, 2019, and a couple of months in 2020, and then you had the pandemic. So we have an issue. The issue is not because of anyone. It's just circumstances that happened, and people lost their job. They moved to different trade. They moved from Egypt. So it's time now to re-educate again and train the staff in order to upgrade the level of service, which we know that there is a problem in it. There is an issue there. Here, it will not help you to get more people, but it will help you to elevate and upgrade the yield, to get a higher yield into the system. I would pay more if I get a better service, which is normal. Better service is not only in food, it's not only in the rooms, but it's also in the human being. And a lot of investment needs to be done here in order to upgrade, but not to get more people, because you can get always more more tourists, but at how much? So it's always a factor of A and C. A is the numbers, A and B. A is number, and B is the yield, and B is the how much. So you multiply by both, you get a revenue. So you can always get a bigger number, but what's the revenue is, and the revenue has to be sufficient for the investment as well. I'm an investor, and I've put a lot of money, and I don't need to sell my room at $20. I need to sell my room at 30 and 40 and 60. This concerned me to train and upgrade the employee, but also it concerned my environment, because the people don't come and stay in the room. they have to go out of the room into the hotel, and they go out of the hotel into the
and get better service.
and into the restaurant, to the diving center, into the beach service, into the transportation companies. All this are, although it looks like different companies and different business, but in fact it all impact on the experience. It's no longer called a trip. It's no longer called a visit. It's called an experience.
This was going to be my second question to you. The touristic experience, which is becoming now the foundation of any rating.
Absolutely.
The rating of any place is by touristic experience, and they just post it over social media. In order to be able to get an excellent touristic experience and be highly rated by visitors, we need to upgrade ourselves and upgrade our strategies. Like you kindly earlier said, that it's not about a room or a certain specific part, but it's a whole system, like a strategy of service, strategy of vision of how to present a touristic experience for a visitor. How are you planning to do that in your 2022?
Well, 2022, vision. Let's start, if we talk about Sinai, let's start to talk about, for instance, Sharm. You know that Sharm has been announced to be the first green city to take place in Egypt. This by itself will attract a lot of more visitors to Sinai, because now it's becoming a big sector in the business, a big sector in traveling. People look for a better environment and green environment, a no pollution environment, and so on. And it's not only about pollution in the air, but pollution is everywhere. And the government is behind turning Sharm el-Sheikh into a green city. Of course, this would not happen tomorrow. It will not happen 2-3 months. It takes years in order to reach this. Just to include, to make sure, for instance, that there is no, that all the transportation vehicles there, or 90% of the transportation vehicles work by electric, electric vehicles rather than the normal one that raise a lot of pollution. But this is only one factor out of many. So this is a project that Egypt is working on it now. I'm sure you know about COP27 and the big conference that will take place in Sharm el-Sheikh in November 2022.
Of course.
It will
and
address...
And it's addressing directly the climate change.
And that coincides extremely well with the plan of the government. That's why the government was really after making sure that the conference takes place in Sharm el-Sheikh, and it will take finally place in Sharm el-Sheikh. There will be the expert of the experts there in Sharm el-Sheikh to address on the subject. The government is working very hard in order to, from here to, of course, you can't turn a city in 9 months to be a green city, but they are doing a lot of effort in order to take few steps. But they announced that Sharm el-Sheikh would be the first green city in Egypt.
They have already come a long way. Sharm el-Sheikh is a very environmentally...
It is, but there are many other things that still needs to be done.
Of course, like everywhere else.
Yeah,
you're
but
looking
of course,
at New York, for example.
Excuse me?
It's very, New York, for example, it's very polluted.
Yes, it is. But it should have been actually much earlier, and Sharm el-Sheikh should have been far different than what that Sharm el-Sheikh we see now. But again, we have, Egypt had a lot of obstacles that you went through that slowed down a little bit the process. But we are there, we finished the pandemic, we finished the Arab Spring, we're now working back on it. We have a commitment to COP27, because for the COP27 to take place, it won't take place in a normal city, so there are a lot of procedures that is currently taking place, but even after COP27, it will continue to ensure that Sharm will be a green city. And then back to the experience that you've just mentioned earlier, you've mentioned it extremely well, and it is the magic word now. It's an experience. I had a great experience when I was in Cancun. I had a super good experience when I was in Kathmandu, wherever it is. And this is how the people express their joy, express their satisfaction. And this is what we want them to come out with and to say when they visit Sharm or Egypt in general. I had a fantastic experience. This is the word of mouth that we need them to spread. And this is what the government is working on now. Number one, is the human training. This is the most important factor.
Exactly.
Because you can have other problems next to it, and the human makes sure to dilute this and not to let you feel it much. You can't do this except having someone who deal directly with you one to one, and give you alternative and give you different issues to replace your if you had any incident so on. Training of human being and training of employees at hotel, restaurant, and not only at terrace, but all the environment surrounding it, transportation companies, diving centers, and so on. Traffic police, very important. And I know that the government is addressing this. Every single person that the tourists will be in touch with or see needs to be trained.
Right. On this note, hopefully, inshallah, an upcoming COP27 is going to be the most successful, very renowned worldwide. The efforts of all Egyptians collaborated together. Of course, Mr. Karim Menabawy, the tourism expert, I'd like to thank you so much, sir. And you have a beautiful day.
Thank you too. Thanks a million.
Thank you, our pleasure. And of course, we're going to go to a short break and we'll come to continue the breakfast show. So stay with us.